The world had changed overnight. It was as if the very fabric of civilization had unraveled with the first signs of the undead. Cities fell, governments crumbled, and humanity was forced into a desperate fight for survival. In the chaos, there was one thing that became clear: the undead were not an unstoppable force, they could be fought. Maya watched from her rooftop, the wind tugging at her hair, her eyes scanning the horizon. The city she once called home now lay in ruins, the distant cries of the undead echoing like a nightmarish lullaby. A small group of survivors had taken refuge in a makeshift hideout, one of many that had sprung up as the world crumbled. Maya had only one goal in mind: survival. But survival wasn't enough anymore. A fire had ignited inside her, one that demanded more than hiding and running. The human resistance was growing, scattered but determined. Maya had heard rumors of a group organizing to fight back, to take back the world from the undead, but it was hard to know what was real in such uncertain times. She clenched her fists, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She could no longer sit idly by. She had to act. A loud bang broke her thoughts as the door to the rooftop creaked open. "Maya," called a voice. It was Lucas, her longtime friend and reluctant ally. His face was covered in dirt, his clothes torn from the countless encounters with the undead. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low and strained. Maya nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. "We need to get to the old station. There's a group there, building something. A resistance, maybe." Lucas didn't hesitate. He knew Maya well enough to understand that once her mind was set on something, there was no changing it. "Let's go then," he said, his tone grim but resolute. The two of them quickly gathered what little they had left: an old, half-broken rifle, some cans of food, and a few makeshift weapons. The streets were dangerous, but they had no choice. They would have to risk it all. They moved through the deserted streets, careful not to make a sound. The undead were always near, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the slightest noise to give them away. As they approached the station, the air grew thick with tension. It was as if the city itself held its breath, watching them. The once bustling station had fallen silent, now overrun with the undead. They could see movement in the shadows, figures stumbling through the broken windows and past the shattered doors. Maya took a deep breath and pulled Lucas to a crouch. "We need to get inside," quietly, she whispered. The station was a fortress of sorts, fortified by survivors who had found a way to hold their ground against the constant threat. But it wasn't foolproof. The undead were relentless, and the group was still rebuilding their strength. They moved cautiously, sticking to the alleyways and side streets, avoiding the main roads where the horde roamed. Maya's heart raced as they neared the entrance to the station. Every step felt like a countdown, the tension thick in the air. Suddenly, there was a sharp noise behind them. A door creaked open, and a figure appeared in the distance. Maya and Lucas froze, their breath catching in their throats. It wasn't a zombie, at least, not yet. The figure was human, but the way they moved was erratic, almost unnatural. Maya motioned for Lucas to stay quiet. "It's one of them," she whispered, her voice barely audible. They had seen it before. Humans infected but not fully transformed, their minds still partially intact, but driven by an insatiable hunger for flesh. The figure stumbled closer, and for a moment, it seemed as though it would pass them by. But then, with a guttural growl, it turned toward them. Maya's instincts kicked in, and before she could think, she grabbed Lucas and pulled him into a nearby doorway, out of sight. The infected human didn't seem to notice them, continuing its slow, zombie-like shuffle. They watched in silence, hoping it would pass. But it didn't. Instead, it let out a scream, half human, half monstrous, and charged toward them with inhuman speed. Time seemed to stretch as Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She raised her rifle, the barrel steady, but before she could pull the trigger, Lucas lunged forward. The infected human was too close. With a brutal shove, Lucas tackled it to the ground, his arms wrapped around its neck as they struggled for control. "Get back!" Lucas shouted, his voice strained with effort. Maya didn't hesitate. She fired. The shot rang out, echoing through the streets, and the infected human went limp. Breathing heavily, Lucas pushed himself up, wiping blood and sweat from his face. "We've got to move. Now." The moment had passed, but the danger wasn't over. The station was still ahead, and every step they took brought them closer to the unknown. Would they find the resistance? Or would the undead find them first? Maya and Lucas pushed forward, their steps quick but careful, as if the very air held a threat of its own. The silence around them was deafening. Even the distant groans of the undead seemed muffled, as if the world itself had paused to watch what would happen next. The station loomed ahead, a silent sentinel in the middle of a crumbling city. They reached the station's entrance, which was barely standing. Broken glass crunched underfoot as they approached, but they paused just before entering. Maya looked to Lucas, a silent exchange passing between them. They had no idea what waited inside, but if the rumors were true, the resistance might be their only chance to make a stand. "Ready?" Lucas asked, adjusting his grip on the makeshift spear he had fashioned from a broken pipe. Maya nodded, her eyes narrowed in determination. "We have to be." The door creaked loudly as Maya pushed it open, and they slipped inside. The interior was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of generators powering dim lights. The station, once a vibrant hub of life, was now little more than a shadow of its former self, fortified with metal sheets and barricades that had been hastily constructed. Empty crates and scattered supplies were strewn about, and the faint scent of sweat and fear filled the air. As they moved further into the station, the weight of the stillness grew. Then, from a darkened corner, a voice called out. "Who's there?" Maya and Lucas froze, instincts kicking in as their hands gripped their weapons tighter. The voice was tense, but it didn't sound hostile, yet. Maya stepped forward, her hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "We're looking for the resistance," she called out, her voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through her. A figure stepped into the dim light. Tall, with a hardened face and a rifle slung across his back, the man studied them with sharp eyes. His gaze lingered on Lucas before moving back to Maya. "You've heard the rumors, then?" the man asked, his voice low. "We've heard enough to know we need your help," Maya replied, stepping forward. She wasn't sure how much to trust this stranger, but they didn't have time for hesitation. "We're fighting to take back what's ours." The man looked them both over, sizing them up. "You're not the first to come looking for a fight," he said, his tone more thoughtful than welcoming. "But there's a price for joining the resistance, and it's not just blood." Maya met his gaze. "We're ready for whatever it takes." The man paused, considering her words. After a moment, he gestured for them to follow. "All right. I'll take you to the others. But don't think for a second it's going to be easy. This isn't a safe haven, it's a war zone." As they walked deeper into the station, Maya's mind raced. The resistance wasn't some utopian safe place where people could rest and regroup. It was a place to prepare for battle, and every person inside had a role to play in the fight for survival. They were all ready to lay their lives on the line for a cause they believed in. Maya didn't know if she was ready for that, but she knew she had no choice. The deeper they went, the more survivors they saw. Some were working on weapons, others were patching up armor. A few were sharpening blades, while others stood in huddled groups, talking in hushed tones. The place was a mix of hope and desperation, but there was no mistaking the determination in everyone's eyes. "These are our people," the man said, turning to face them. "We fight for each other, and we fight for the world we lost. But we don't fight alone. There's a network of us spread out across the country. And every day, we grow stronger. So, what are you willing to risk to be a part of this?" Maya glanced at Lucas, his face hard with resolve. He didn't hesitate. We're in. Whatever it takes. The man nodded, as if he had expected this answer. All right, then. Follow me. They followed him through a maze of corridors until they reached a large room at the heart of the station. In the center of the room was a large map of the city, covered with pins and markers indicating safe zones, zombie hotspots, and the locations of other resistance groups. Around the map stood several more survivors, all deep in conversation, their faces grim but determined. At the table, a woman looked up as they entered. Her eyes were sharp, and her expression unreadable. She was the leader, Maya could tell immediately. The man who had brought them here gave a quick nod, then stepped aside. We have new recruits, the man said. They're ready to fight. The woman's eyes flicked to Maya and Lucas. She studied them both for a moment before speaking. Are you sure you're ready to fight? Because when you join us, there's no turning back. Maya nodded, her heart racing. We're ready. We have to be. The woman's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Welcome to the resistance. But as Maya took a step forward, something in the back of her mind nagged at her. They had just walked into what might be the only hope left for humanity. But was it really hope, or was it just another battleground? As the woman turned back to the map, Maya's unease grew. This wasn't the beginning of a peaceful rebellion, it was the start of a war that would determine whether humanity would rise again or fall forever to the undead. And Maya knew one thing for sure, the real fight was just beginning. The next morning, Maya and Lucas woke to the muffled sounds of activity. The resistance was already awake, preparing for another day of survival. The air was thick with urgency and the smell of burning fuel from the makeshift generators that powered the station. Maya sat up, stretching her stiff muscles, her mind still racing with the events of the previous night. The woman, whose name was Eliza, had given them a task: gather supplies and scout the nearby areas for signs of the undead horde. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. The group needed to know where the danger was coming from so they could prepare for the next fight. Maya had expected Eliza to send them on a more dangerous mission right away, but the resistance wasn't in a rush to throw newcomers into the most perilous tasks. They had to earn their place. As Maya checked her gear, a simple, worn backpack with a few basic supplies, she glanced over at Lucas, who was tightening his makeshift armor. He looked ready, his eyes sharp, but there was a quiet tension in the air. The weight of their new reality had settled in. This wasn't just about surviving another day, it was about taking the first step towards pushing the undead back, reclaiming what had been lost. After a quick breakfast of canned beans and stale bread, they gathered with the others in the central area of the station. Eliza was there, speaking with a handful of survivors, strategizing the next move. Maya and Lucas approached her, and she gave them a nod of acknowledgement. Today, you'll be going out with Sam and Matt, Eliza said, gesturing to two men nearby. Sam was tall, with a scar running across his cheek, and Matt was stockier, his arms bulging with muscle. They both looked like veterans of the apocalypse, their faces hardened by countless battles with the undead. You two know what to do? Eliza asked, her eyes scanning them both. Lucas gave a curt nod, his jaw set. We're ready. Maya was less certain, but she wasn't about to back down now. Yeah. We'll follow your lead. Eliza didn't respond right away. Instead, she handed them each a map and a small device, a communicator. Keep in contact, she said firmly. Stay out of sight. Don't engage unless you have no other choice. With that, the four of them set out, stepping cautiously through the back corridors of the station and emerging into the streets. The sun was barely above the horizon, casting long shadows across the decimated city. As they moved, the eerie silence was broken only by the occasional distant growl or the faint shuffling of feet. Maya kept her senses alert, her hand on the rifle slung across her back. Sam led the way, his pace steady but deliberate. He knew the city well, having been one of the first to scout the area after the outbreak. His footsteps were silent, like a shadow passing through the ruins. Maya and Lucas followed closely behind, trying to match his pace. The further they moved, the more the city seemed like a ghost town. Buildings were reduced to rubble, their windows shattered and walls crumbling. Overturned cars and abandoned buses littered the streets, a testament to the chaos that had overtaken the world. But it wasn't the destruction that bothered Maya, it was the emptiness. The sense that everything they had known was gone. "Keep your eyes open," Sam murmured, his voice low and urgent. "We're close to one of the known hot zones. The undead tend to congregate there, especially at night." Maya's heart beat a little faster. They had entered an area where survival wasn't guaranteed. The danger wasn't just lurking around the corner, it was everywhere. Suddenly, Matt raised a hand, signaling for them to stop. He crouched low and gestured for the others to do the same. Maya instinctively followed suit, her body tensing with anticipation. "What's going on?" she whispered, her breath shallow. "Movement," Sam replied, his voice barely audible. "In the alley ahead." They all fell silent, listening intently. The sound of shuffling feet reached their ears, growing louder with every passing second. Maya's eyes darted to the alleyway up ahead. There was a figure stumbling out of the darkness, one of the undead. It was an elderly man, his face twisted in a grotesque expression, his eyes vacant. His clothes were torn, and he moved with a jerky, unnatural gait. Maya's stomach churned at the sight, but she quickly pushed the disgust aside. This was the new reality. The undead were no longer a distant nightmare, they were right in front of them, waiting for the slightest sign of weakness. Sam nodded toward the alley, signaling that they needed to move quickly. They couldn't afford to waste time with a lone walker. With practiced ease, he drew his knife and silently approached the creature, while Matt took up a position, watching for any more signs of movement. Maya's eyes remained fixed on Sam as he closed the distance between himself and the undead. There was no hesitation in his movements. He swung the knife in one swift motion, the blade finding its mark. The walker crumpled to the ground with a faint grunt, its body limp and lifeless once more. For a moment, everything was still again. "Good," Sam muttered, wiping the blade clean before sheathing it. "Keep moving." Maya and Lucas exchanged a quick glance, both of them shaken by the cold efficiency of it all. This was the world they were now a part of, a world where survival meant ruthlessness, and every moment was a reminder of how easily life could be lost. They continued their trek through the city, passing through narrow alleys and side streets, always on high alert. But the deeper they went, the more something began to feel off. The undead were there, but they weren't as numerous as Sam had warned. In fact, it seemed too quiet. It was almost as if the city was holding its breath. Suddenly, a low growl broke the silence, and before anyone could react, a figure leaped from the shadows. It wasn't a walker, at least, not entirely. It was a person. But their eyes were wild, their face twisted with madness. They charged toward them, moving too fast to be fully human. Maya barely had time to react before the figure was upon them. The figure lunged at them with a ferocity that sent chills down Maya's spine. It wasn't just a zombie, it was something far more dangerous. The man, or what used to be a man, was moving with unnatural speed, his eyes wide with insanity. His body was gaunt, but his muscles were more defined than any of the undead they had encountered. He wasn't just stumbling or dragging himself like the others. This creature was coordinated, driven by something far more sinister than hunger. Before Maya could fully comprehend what was happening, the creature reached out with claw-like hands, swiping at Lucas. His reflexes kicked in just in time, and Lucas dodged to the side, barely avoiding the man's grasp. But the creature's speed was overwhelming, and it was already back on him, its snarl filling the air. Sam was the first to react, his combat knife flashing in the dim light as he lunged toward the creature, but it twisted out of the way with terrifying agility. The knife missed by inches. The creature's movement was fluid, too fluid. It didn't just move like a zombie. It moved like something alive, something that still had control over its body. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she drew her rifle, her hands shaking. She had never seen anything like this before. The undead had always been slow, predictable. But this was different. Take cover. Sam shouted, shoving Maya and Lucas behind a crumbling brick wall. The creature followed them, not slowing down, its growls growing louder with each passing second. They were trapped. "Is that one of them?" Maya asked, breathless, her voice barely a whisper. The man, no, the creature, was pacing back and forth, like a predator circling its prey. "It's not just a zombie," Sam said, his voice grim. "It's something else. Something the virus is turning them into." Lucas looked at Sam, his face filled with confusion. "What do you mean?" "It's moving like it's still alive." Sam's gaze hardened. "We've been seeing more of them recently. They're faster, stronger. They're evolving, adapting. Whatever's happening to them, it's not just the infection, it's something worse. And if this keeps up, the undead won't just be a threat, they'll be unstoppable." Maya's breath caught in her throat. This was worse than she could have imagined. The undead had always been a horrifying reality, but this was something else. The virus had mutated, changing the very nature of what it meant to be a zombie. "We need to get out of here," Matt said urgently, pulling Maya's attention back to the situation. "This place is crawling with them. And this new breed is more dangerous than anything we've faced." Before anyone could move, the creature charged again, faster than before. Sam reacted instinctively, raising his knife and stabbing it into the creature's side. But the thing barely flinched. It let out an inhuman screech, spinning to grab Sam's arm, twisting it with bone-crushing force. "Sam!" Lucas shouted, moving forward, but Matt grabbed his arm. "Stay back!" Matt barked. "We can't help him if we rush in." Sam struggled, his knife still embedded in the creature's side, but it was no use. The creature slammed him into the ground, pinning him beneath its weight. It let out a guttural growl, the sound echoing through the alley. Maya's mind raced. She had to do something. They couldn't lose Sam, not now. The creature was too powerful, but there had to be a way to stop it. Without thinking, Maya aimed her rifle at the creature's head, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. She pulled the trigger, the shot ringing out, but the creature didn't fall. Instead, it let out an enraged scream and turned its attention toward her. The moment of hesitation was all it needed. In the blink of an eye, the creature was on her, its claws reaching for her throat. But before it could reach her, Lucas shoved her out of the way, taking the brunt of the impact himself. He staggered backward, the creature's claws tearing through his shirt, but he managed to keep his feet under him. "Get off him!" Maya screamed, her voice filled with panic. The creature wasn't done yet. It swiped again, knocking Lucas to the ground, and it was ready to finish him off when Matt finally made his move. With a battle cry, he charged at the creature, tackling it from the side with surprising strength. The two rolled across the ground, fighting for control, and Maya saw her opportunity. Without hesitation, she reloaded her rifle, aiming once more. This time, she aimed for the creature's chest, and fired. The shot landed with a sickening thud, the force of the bullet knocking the creature off Matt. It staggered back, its body jerking as if trying to recover, but it was too late. The creature's head snapped back at an unnatural angle, and it collapsed to the ground in a heap. Breathing heavily, Maya rushed to Lucas's side, her hands shaking as she checked him for injuries. He groaned, his hand pressing against his chest, but his eyes were clear. He wasn't mortally wounded, just badly bruised. "You all right?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "Yeah," Lucas managed, his voice strained. That thing, what the hell was that? Maya didn't have an answer. All she knew was that they were facing something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The undead weren't just mindless killers anymore, they were evolving, adapting, and becoming something much worse. As Matt helped Sam to his feet, the full gravity of their situation set in. The world they had known was gone. In its place was a new, horrifying reality, a world where the undead didn't just hunger for flesh. They were becoming smarter, faster, stronger. And if they were going to survive, they would need to fight not just the undead, but whatever the virus was turning them into. The sky had turned a muted gray by the time they made it back to the station, each of them exhausted but more aware than ever of the dangers that lurked in the world beyond the walls. The once quiet city streets now seemed like a war zone, the air thick with the scent of decay and tension. Maya's mind kept racing over what they had encountered. The creature they had just fought wasn't just a random anomaly, it was the tip of the iceberg. Whatever mutation was happening to the undead was more dangerous than they had ever feared. As they entered the Resistance stronghold, Sam leaned heavily on Lucas for support, still recovering from the attack. The Resistance members who had remained behind were already at work, securing supplies and fortifying their defenses. It was clear that every member of the Resistance had become part of something bigger now, each of them a cog in a machine that was fighting to reclaim the world they had lost. Maya's thoughts kept drifting back to the creature they had encountered, the way it moved with a predatory instinct, unlike anything she'd ever seen before. She could still hear its growls echoing in her mind, a reminder that they were no longer just fighting to survive, they were fighting to stay ahead of an enemy that was evolving, changing faster than they could adapt. As they entered the central hub of the station, Eliza looked up from a map she was studying. She had an intense air about her, her sharp eyes scanning the room as she processed the incoming reports. When she saw Sam, she immediately stood up, walking over to him. "You made it back," Eliza said, her voice low but relieved. "What happened out there?" Sam let out a strained breath. "We encountered something new. It wasn't a regular zombie. It was fast, too fast. And stronger than anything we've faced before. It nearly took us down." Eliza's expression hardened. "I feared as much. The reports we've been getting from the other groups tell the same story. The undead are evolving. If we don't act fast, we're going to be fighting an enemy we can't even understand." Maya couldn't hide the fear that surged in her chest at Eliza's words. "What are we supposed to do? How do we fight something like that?" "We adapt," Eliza replied. "We build, we plan, and we learn from every encounter. The undead aren't just a random occurrence anymore. Whatever's mutating them, it's something that's going to take everything we have to stop." Sam leaned against a nearby crate, his eyes weary. "It's not just about surviving anymore. We need to go on the offensive." Lucas stepped forward, his voice firm. "How do we even begin to fight back against something like this? If they're evolving, they're going to get harder to kill, faster. We need a strategy." Eliza nodded, her face grim but determined. "Exactly. That's why we need to get as much information as possible. I'm sending out scouting teams tomorrow. We need to learn more about what we're up against, and we need to do it fast. Maya, Lucas, you two are part of that team." Maya felt her stomach twist with nerves. The last thing she wanted was to face more of those mutated creatures, but Eliza's words rang true. The only way they were going to survive was by understanding what they were up against. "What's the plan?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the fear brewing inside her. Eliza walked over to a large whiteboard and drew several circles and lines. "We're going to start with the largest concentration of the undead we've detected in the area. There's a warehouse district on the outskirts of the city. It's crawling with zombies, and we need to know if there are more of these, new ones there." Maya nodded, trying to steady her nerves. "And if we encounter any of them?" "We fight," Eliza said simply. "But we do so with caution. We can't afford to lose anyone else. This isn't just about strength, it's about strategy. The words settled heavily in the room. Every person in the resistance knew what they were up against, and they knew that any misstep could mean the end of them. There was no going back. Later that night, as the station fell into a quiet, uneasy silence, Maya sat on her cot, staring at the ceiling. Her mind was racing with thoughts of the next day's mission. She couldn't shake the image of the creature's eyes, the way it had looked at her like it was hunting her, like it had purpose. Lucas, who had been quiet for most of the evening, sat beside her. His eyes were distant, his face tight with thought. Finally, he spoke. "Do you think there's any hope left? I mean, how do we even stop this? We can't even keep up with the undead, and now they're evolving into something worse." Maya didn't have an answer. She'd thought about it all day, about the future, about the world they were fighting to reclaim. And while she couldn't deny the fear creeping into her bones, she also knew one thing: they couldn't give up. Not now, not when they were so close to finally fighting back. "I don't know," she said quietly, her voice soft. "But we can't stop fighting. As long as we're breathing, we fight. We're all that's left." Lucas didn't reply right away, but Maya could see the quiet resolve in his eyes. He understood, as she did, that the only way to survive was to push forward, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The next day, they gathered their gear, preparing for the scouting mission. The weight of the unknown pressed heavily on Maya's chest. They were about to enter the heart of the undead's new domain, and they didn't know what they'd find. But one thing was clear: whatever they encountered, they had to be ready. And so, with weapons in hand and the resolve of a desperate world behind them, they set out into the unknown, determined to face whatever came next. Because in this new world, there was only one rule: survive at all costs. The early morning mist hung low over the abandoned city, a shroud of uncertainty cloaking the streets as Maya, Lucas, Sam, and the rest of their scouting team made their way toward the warehouse district. The air was thick with tension, and despite the quiet, Maya could feel the weight of every step, each one taking them closer to the unknown. As they approached the outskirts of the city, the remnants of a once bustling industrial area came into view. The tall, decaying buildings loomed like silent sentinels, their windows shattered, doors hanging off their hinges. The warehouse district had been a hub of commerce before the outbreak, now it was a place of nightmares. "Stay sharp," Eliza's voice crackled through the radio, cutting through the silence. "We've had reports of increased undead activity in the area. Keep your heads on a swivel." Maya tightened her grip on her rifle, her pulse quickening. She had fought off zombies before, but something about this mission felt different. The unknown creature they had encountered, the new breed, was still fresh in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that the further they went into this district, the more likely they were to run into something even worse. The team moved cautiously, their boots crunching over debris and broken glass as they navigated the narrow, overgrown alleyways between the warehouses. The sound of distant groaning and scratching filled the air, the unmistakable signs of the undead lurking just out of sight. But there was something off, something that made Maya's skin crawl. "Keep moving," Sam muttered, his voice low, his eyes scanning the shadows. "We can't waste time." They rounded a corner, and the first of the warehouses came into view. Its once white walls were now covered in grime, the doors hanging open as if inviting them inside. Maya's stomach churned. The place was an open invitation to danger, but they had no choice but to proceed. The team entered the warehouse cautiously, the creaking of the old structure echoing around them. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of rot lingered in the stale air. The shelves that once held goods were now bare, save for a few scattered remnants of what had once been. Maya moved forward, her senses on high alert. Every creak, every whisper of wind, made her jump. The deeper they went into the warehouse, the more unsettling it became. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional scrape of something, or someone, moving just out of sight. Check the corners, Sam ordered, his voice low. Keep your eyes peeled. If anything's in here, we're not letting it get the jump on us. They moved methodically, sweeping each area with precision. Maya's heart raced in her chest, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. It was too quiet, too still. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement. A flash of shadow darted across the far end of the warehouse. Did anyone see that? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She had to be sure. The shadows were playing tricks on her, but her gut told her that something was wrong. I saw it too, Lucas replied, his voice tight with urgency. We're not alone in here. Suddenly, there was a noise, a low, guttural growl that sent a chill down Maya's spine. It was coming from behind one of the large crates. Without thinking, she lifted her rifle, her body instinctively moving into a defensive stance. Move back. Sam barked. Get to cover. But it was too late. A figure exploded from behind the crate, moving faster than any zombie should have been able to. The creature's face was twisted in a grotesque mockery of human form, its skin was mottled and stretched, eyes wide and feral. It snarled at them, its movements jerky but precise. It was one of them, the new breed. And it was ready to hunt. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as the creature lunged toward them with terrifying speed. Sam was the first to react, throwing himself in front of Maya and Lucas, his combat knife raised high. But the creature was already upon him. Its claws slashed across his arm, sending him stumbling backward, but he gritted his teeth and held his ground. Fall back. Sam shouted, his voice strained. It's too fast. We need to regroup. But the creature wasn't backing down. It let out a shriek that reverberated off the walls, and before anyone could react, a second figure appeared from the shadows. Then a third. The warehouse was suddenly swarming with the mutated undead, each one moving with unnatural speed and precision. We're surrounded. Lucas shouted, his voice full of panic. He swung his rifle around, trying to cover all angles, but the creatures were closing in too quickly. Stay calm. Maya yelled, trying to keep her composure. We need to take them down one by one. But the creatures were relentless. They moved in pairs, darting from cover to cover, forcing the survivors to keep shifting positions. Maya fired at one of the creatures, the shot hitting its shoulder, but it didn't stop. It simply kept coming. Ammo's low. Sam shouted, his voice laced with desperation. We need to get out of here. Maya glanced around frantically, looking for an escape route. The door they had entered was too far away, and there were no other exits visible. They were trapped in the heart of the enemy's lair, and the odds were stacking against them. Then, suddenly, the sound of distant gunfire rang out. The unmistakable crack of a high-powered rifle echoed across the warehouse, and for a moment, the creatures hesitated. Maya's heart leaped into her throat. The gunfire was coming from outside, someone was here to help. But the creatures didn't back down. If anything, they seemed to become more frantic, more vicious. The only thing that kept the group alive was their ability to keep moving, dodging, weaving, and firing when they had the chance. But they were running out of options, and time was running out. In the midst of the chaos, Maya spotted a stairwell leading to a second floor. Without hesitation, she grabbed Lucas's arm and pulled him toward it. We're getting out of here, she said, her voice determined. Move. They climbed the stairs quickly, their hearts pounding in their chests. Behind them, the creatures howled in frustration, but they couldn't follow up the stairs, at least, not easily. But as they reached the second floor, Maya's hope began to fade. More creatures appeared, this time coming from the upper levels of the warehouse. They were everywhere. And they were closing in fast. Maya's breath came in ragged gasps as she and Lucas backed into a corner of the second floor. The stairs they had just climbed were now swarmed with the mutated undead, their growls echoing up from below. The narrow walkway was quickly filling with creatures, each one more vicious and unpredictable than the last. "Where's the rest of the team?" Lucas shouted, his voice rising in panic. He glanced around desperately, but there was no sign of Sam, Eliza, or the others. It was just the two of them, cornered and outnumbered. "They're down there somewhere," Maya replied, her voice tight with worry. "We have to hold them off long enough for the others to get here." The air around them felt heavy, charged with the suffocating sense of impending doom. Maya's rifle was shaking in her hands. Every inch of her body screamed for her to run, to get out of this place. But there was no escape. The only choice was to fight, and Maya wasn't about to let these creatures win without a fight. "We're not dying here," she said, more to herself than to Lucas. "We're going to hold them off." Lucas nodded, his face pale but determined. "Right. We fight until we can't anymore." Maya scanned the second-floor warehouse, looking for anything they could use as an advantage. The place was filled with old crates and broken shelving units, but nothing that would offer much protection. She knew they had limited time. Every second they wasted was another second closer to being overwhelmed. The creatures on the first floor were closing in, their low growls growing louder. Maya could see their twisted, deformed bodies moving in and out of the shadows. Some were on all fours, others shambling awkwardly, but all of them were driven by one thing: hunger. And they were hungry for the living. "They're almost up here," Lucas said, his voice strained. He tightened his grip on his weapon, his eyes scanning the doorway to the stairs. The sound of footsteps on the metal steps sent a chill through his spine. Maya quickly checked her ammo, her hands moving with practiced precision. It wasn't much, maybe 5 rounds left. They would have to make each shot count. She glanced at Lucas and saw the same realization dawning on him. They were outnumbered, underprepared, and on the verge of being surrounded. And yet, despite the odds, neither of them spoke of surrender. A sudden crash echoed from the lower floor. A zombie had smashed through a crate, sending wood splinters flying. The first creature appeared at the top of the stairs, its grotesque face twisted into a snarl. It was fast, too fast, and Maya fired without hesitation. The shot rang out, and the creature staggered back, but it didn't fall. It only seemed angrier. "More are coming," Maya yelled. "They're getting close." Lucas fired a few rounds in quick succession, hitting 2 of the approaching zombies, but they kept coming. The creatures were relentless, as if they couldn't feel pain. The undead were evolving, becoming stronger, faster, and they seemed to learn from every encounter. With each passing moment, the noise from the lower floor grew louder. The zombies were moving up, too many to count, all eager to finish what they had started. Just as Maya was about to fire again, a sharp cry echoed from below. It was Sam's voice. "Maya." "Lucas." Sam's voice was strained, but it was unmistakably his. "Get to the roof. We've got a way out." Maya's heart skipped a beat. Sam had somehow found a way out. But there was no time to waste. The creatures were closing in. "Let's go." Maya shouted to Lucas, motioning toward the nearby fire escape ladder that led to the roof. It was their only chance. But as they moved toward the ladder, more mutated zombies appeared at the top of the stairs. The creatures were quick, too quick. Maya shot at one of them, hitting it square in the chest, but it kept coming. She turned to Lucas. "Go, now," Maya ordered, shoving him toward the ladder. Lucas hesitated for a moment, then nodded and began to climb. Maya covered him, firing at the approaching creatures as fast as she could. But with every shot, her ammo dwindled, and the zombies closed the gap. Lucas reached the top of the ladder just as the creatures reached the second-floor landing. Maya was right behind him, her hands already gripping the edge of the rooftop when a creature grabbed her ankle. She kicked out in a panic, dislodging its grip just in time, but the scrape of its claws left a deep cut on her leg. "Maya!" Lucas shouted, pulling her onto the roof with him. He reached out, his hands steady, and helped her up. Breathing hard, Maya stumbled to her feet, her leg burning with pain. She glanced back at the rooftop door, the creatures still swarming at the base of the ladder. But they couldn't follow them here, not easily. For now, they were safe. "Where's Sam?" Maya asked, her voice tight. Just as she spoke, the sound of footsteps echoed from a nearby corner. Sam, breathless but unharmed, appeared, his gun still in hand. His expression was grim. "We've got trouble," Sam said quickly, glancing around at the surroundings. "The streets are swarming. We can't go down that way." Maya glanced at the horizon. The city stretched out in front of them, a sprawling mass of decaying buildings and destruction. But at least now, they had the advantage, at least for the moment. They could see everything from here. "We can't stay here long," Lucas said, his voice urgent. "We need a plan." Sam nodded. "We head west. There's an old research facility out that way. We might find something there to help us understand what's going on with these creatures." Maya's eyes scanned the horizon, the weight of their situation sinking in. They had no choice but to move forward. The resistance needed answers, and they needed them fast. "Let's go," she said firmly, setting her jaw. "This fight isn't over." And with that, they moved, knowing that every step they took was one closer to uncovering the truth about the undead and the twisted future they were now facing. The resistance had only just begun. The wind howled through the desolate city streets as Maya, Lucas, Sam, and the rest of the team descended from the rooftop. With the undead still swarming below, they knew every moment counted. The escape route Sam had spoken of, the old research facility, was their only hope now. But the path ahead was treacherous. They couldn't afford to waste any time. "We stick together. No one falls behind," Maya ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. She could feel the pressure mounting, but she was more determined than ever. They couldn't let the city swallow them. They had to fight back. The team moved swiftly, darting through alleyways and abandoned streets. The sun was beginning to set, casting a dim, eerie light over the crumbling buildings around them. As they neared the outskirts of the city, the sounds of the undead became a distant growl, but Maya knew better than to assume they were safe. They couldn't afford to relax. "Not yet. We're almost there," Sam called over his shoulder, leading the group through a narrow, crumbling street. The research facility was only a few miles away now, but it felt like a lifetime. They had no idea what they would find there, only that it might hold the key to understanding what was happening to the world. Maya's mind raced. What had started as an isolated outbreak had quickly spiraled into an unstoppable force, consuming cities, entire countries, and now, it seemed, the very fabric of society itself. The zombies they had faced weren't the mindless creatures they had once known. These things were different. They were faster, smarter, and more dangerous. Something had changed. Something was evolving. "Hold up," Lucas whispered urgently, his eyes darting to the side. "We've got company." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She knew the unmistakable sound of shuffling footsteps. It was close, too close. A figure appeared around the corner. It was one of them. A creature, its twisted body moving in jerky, unnatural ways, its eyes locked on the team. But there was something more, something off about this one. It wasn't just the typical zombie they had faced so far. It was different. Larger. Stronger. And it was heading straight for them. "Get ready," Maya hissed, raising her rifle. The creature was closing in fast, its gnarled hands reaching for them. The others quickly followed suit, taking their positions and aiming their weapons. Just as the creature lunged, a series of sharp shots rang out from behind them. A volley of bullets struck the creature, sending it tumbling back with a roar. Maya turned to see a group of survivors, dressed in mismatched tactical gear, emerging from the shadows. They were heavily armed, but they didn't look like the average scavengers. There was something about them, something more organized, more military. "Who are you?" Maya asked, her rifle still trained on the downed creature. The leader of the group, a woman with dark hair tied into a tight bun, stepped forward. Her face was stern but determined. "We're part of the human resistance. We've been tracking the undead movements for weeks now. Looks like we found you just in time." Maya lowered her rifle, but she was still wary. Trust wasn't something they could afford to give easily, not in this new world. "What's your goal? And what's with the firepower?" "We've been fighting the same battle you are," the woman replied. "But we've learned that it's not just the zombies we have to worry about. There are others, people who want to use the chaos to their advantage. And we're trying to stop them." Maya's mind raced. People? Was there another faction out there? She had feared this. Humanity wasn't going to stay united for long in the wake of the outbreak. If there were other survivors out there who were willing to exploit the situation for power, they might be just as dangerous as the undead. "We need to move," Sam interjected, glancing around nervously. "More are coming." The woman nodded. "We've got a safe house nearby. Follow us." Reluctantly, Maya agreed, signaling to her team to follow the resistance group. As they moved through the streets, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a much larger conflict. The world had already descended into chaos, but now there were factions, power struggles, and alliances, some that might be just as dangerous as the horde they were running from. Finally, after a tense walk, they reached a fortified building. The heavy door was opened, and they were ushered inside. The place was well equipped, bunk beds lined the walls, weapons and gear were stacked in neat piles, and there was even a small medical area set up in the corner. It wasn't a luxury shelter, but it was a safe place, at least for the time being. Maya and her team were given a moment to rest, but there was little time for comfort. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. "What now?" Maya asked, turning to the leader of the resistance group. "We head to the facility," the woman replied. "We've got intel that something big is happening there, something that could turn the tide of this war." Maya's mind went back to the research facility. It was their last hope for answers. The facility might hold the secrets to how the undead were evolving, and if they were lucky, it might even hold the key to stopping it. She knew they couldn't waste any time. The creatures were getting smarter, faster, and if they didn't find a solution soon, humanity would be wiped out. This was the turning point, the moment that would decide the future of their world. "Then let's move," Maya said, her voice filled with resolve. "We've got a fight to win." As the team prepared to head out, the weight of their mission settled on Maya's shoulders. The war for the future of humanity had just begun, and they were standing at the forefront of it. There would be no turning back now. Every decision, every move, could change the course of history. The resistance had to stand firm, or everything they had fought for would be lost. The fight for survival wasn't just about beating the zombies, it was about reclaiming the future from the hands of those who would use the chaos for their own gain. And Maya was ready. The fight was far from over.